Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Carmel Bell, and she's going to share her near-death experience with us. Hi, Carmel.
Hi Peggy, how are you?
Good. Did you see the eclipse today?
No, because I don't know if it was here or if it's happened yet. It must have, or maybe it was the day before, because I'm in Australia, remember?
Okay, that's right.
Down the bottom of Australia.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm in Ohio, so I watched it, but if I hadn't known when it was and looked through this welding lens my husband has, I wouldn't have known anything. I thought it was going to get
yeah,
dark for a few minutes. It didn't.
yeah. That's the thing with eclipses is I'm often disappointed in them because, you think that the whole world's going to go really, really black,
Yeah.
and it doesn't. It's sort of just, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd
Okay.
probably be lovely to see in the Antarctic, though. An eclipse in the Antarctic would be great.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've always wanted to see the is it Northern Lights? The Is that
Yeah.
what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Me too. You
We
can
have a
see them in the UK
Can you?
really easily. They get them there all the time. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I have a
Yeah.
daughter in Alaska and she has seen them. Yeah.
Oh, what a, what a lucky you. You can go to Alaska and
I've
watch
never
them
been
with
there.
her.
My husband wants to go.
Yeah, me too. Me
Yeah.
too. But I
Yeah.
think that's, in honesty, that's due to that song, John Wayne did the movie North to Alaska.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and that song when I was like, I don't know, about 12 or something, just really intrigued me. It was such a great song that I've had a hankering to go to Alaska ever since.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
Now, your near-death experience, you were 4 years old?
that was my first one.
First
Yeah,
one.
because I've had four in total.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, I was 4 years of age with my first one. And it was actually it was weird how it happened because it was June, I think, in Australia, which is the middle of our winter, and we lived in the country. So it was very cold and, open fires for heat. And for some reason, I woke up and I don't know why I woke up. And I thought, gosh, I can't go back to sleep. So I think I'll clean. So I
At
got up
four?
at 4. Yeah, at 4. Yeah, at 4. Quite extraordinary, but like I was fanatical about things being neat and tidy. And my
Oh,
mum, as an interesting side story, was the daughter of a very wealthy, renowned man in Australia. And she grew up with nannies and maids. So she'd never cleaned, she'd never cooked any, like nothing. So she had no idea how to really do any of that. So our house was always like messy, not never dirty, but just messy, untidy, whatever. And so I used to try and help her by cleaning. So anyway, I got up and thought I'll go clean, and I thought I'll go to the sunroom where Mum did her sewing, and I was wearing a nightie, and I went into the sunroom, and it was really cold in there, and Mum had a bar radiator heater in there for extra warmth when she was sewing, which just had like the coat hanger strips on it. So, being cold, I turned that on to get a little bit warm. And being 4, I wasn't very smart. So, I just leant over the heater to try and tidy up her sewing desk. And my nightgown went into the heater and very engrossed. So I didn't notice that it was burning. It caught fire and was burning, and I didn't notice until smoke and flames started to reach my face. And by then, it had already burned up my legs. But as we found out later, I'm in the autism spectrum, and and I'm oppositional defiance disorder, which is great for my profession, and it means that I'm really like single-minded and focused and unable to be dissuaded from doing anything until I've finished, right? So I looked down, sort of going, and I ran. I just ran out of the sunroom and around the corner, and I collapsed in the hallway. And my father woke up and saw a light on. He doesn't know why he woke up, but he woke up and he saw a light on, and he thought, oh, we must have forgotten to turn off the hall light. And then he realized that the light was flickering, and he jumped out of bed and raced down the hallway and found me on the floor blazing away. So, like I was pretty well, I think I was lying on my back because my chest got a lot of the burns. So, and I had a nylon scarf tied around my neck, and that was apparently just starting to melt into my neck. So he beat the flames out with his hands and screamed to my mother to get a rug to wrap me up in. And in the country, there were no like ambulances really, because they had such a huge area to service. So he just bundled me up into a blanket, and that's the last thing that I clearly remember until I woke up in hospital a couple of days later, I think. And in the time that he, like physically remembering the time between him finding me and putting the flames out, I died. And it's the only near-death experience that I can't actually like prove, as it were. It's on faith and trust. But it was the first time that I met my guides, and the first time that I met Archangel Metatron and Jesus. And they actually told me, and this is a thing that stayed with me all my life, that they told me I would do this profession. And how they described it is I would be a doctor who was not a doctor, and I would be able to see energy and use a specific energy, which I can just now feeling talking about it going into my hand. And that I asked them if I would have any help. And they told me that I would meet and marry a man called Bernie. And at that stage, I'd never even heard of the name before. And of course, I don't know, like people who have read my books, some of your listeners may have, I have been married twice, and both of times to a man named Bernie.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's ironic that you were burned when you had it, and the guy's named
Bernie. Yeah. Actually, you know what? I'd never thought of that. Isn't that bizarre? Yeah, I burned and met Bernie. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah. But, from then on, my career as a medical intuitive actually started from that point. I didn't know what to call it, and I didn't know what I was doing, and it certainly got me into more trouble than enough.
What did the guide and Jesus look like to you? What did you see there?
Oh, well, Jesus actually looked, he looked like a normal man with nicely tanned skin and, mid-browny dark hair, not black, whatever. And he was thin. He was thin, and he had really nice hands. And the interesting thing was that he had very blue eyes. And, I wouldn't have expected that. And certainly, like when I've looked at figures and so forth of Jesus, they are nowhere near the kind of man that he actually looked like facially. Facially, is that a word? And the Archangel Metatron was really tall. Like I had never heard of Metatron, never heard of archangels. I think I knew of angels because my parents were Catholic, and so we were dragged along dutifully to church every Sunday. Oh my God, oh, so boring. And but Metatron appeared like in my mind now as an adult. He would have been about 10 feet tall, and I remember when he bent down to talk to me, or actually he knelt down to talk to me. He had the most amazing eyes that the only way I can describe, his eyes looked like galaxies, like there were galaxies, if you can imagine that, instead of having a blue or a brown or a grey iris, he had these irises that were constantly changing and moving, like the galaxy had been sped up a million times, and it's just like moving through his irises. It was weird. It's one of those things that just stays with me all my life, even through the other three death experiences. It has stayed.
Did you go from on fire to somewhere there with them?
Yeah, I was in a space. I'm not really sure what the space was, but before I met these beings, it was the space that I was in was probably the most, I suppose, traditionally told about near-death experience. Although I'd never, as you can imagine, I'd never heard of a near-death experience then. In fact, this was bizarre, but it was like just a white space, a white room, and I stood there not knowing what I should do or where I was, and there was no like echo. It was like if you dropped a penny, the penny just would have gone plunk, and there would have been no reverberation. And then I remember looking straight ahead of me, and I could see these massive silver gates, I suppose, or fence or whatever, that seemed to have no beginning, no end. And I walked a little closer to them, and these gates were full of animals and plants and trees and everything alive that you can imagine. And it was constantly twisting and turning and moving around. And I remember looking off to the side, and all that seemed to disappear. And then I was in like a desert space, and there was Metatron and Jesus, and they were just standing there waiting for me.
Was there sound?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, but it was in front of like an oasis area. And my clearest memory of that is that there was water and there was a palm tree. And again, ever since then, I have had this thing about palm trees. I know I'm in the right space if I find a palm tree. I go, oh, I'm where I belong. And that's where I met my initial, or my like everlasting guides for the first time too.
There were guides besides the angel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Besides Metatron and Jesus, for like standing further back and waiting was a couple of people who Jesus introduced me to, and their names were Peter and Hiram. Now, they've been with me since I was 4 years of age, and they still are my main team today.
Ever since the NDE?
Yeah.
Do
Yep.
you
Ever
hear
since.
them or see them, or how's
No,
that?
I hear them. I hear them and I see them and I feel them. They communicate with me in the best way. Before my last NDE, which was 15 years ago now, and that's the one where I was dead for about an hour. And the last time I heard them after I came home from, like, because I was in a coma and then I was in rehab, and then I came home for a weekend in between, and I felt so alone. I've never felt that alone and bereft in my life, because I couldn't intuitively hear or see or do anything, and my brain felt hot and swollen and like really, just it was awful. And I remember lying down, like going to bed and lying down and just wanting to go to sleep and never wake up. I thought, I just want to die. And again, and stay dead. And then I felt this hand on my head, like touching my head. And I opened my eyes and looked up, and there was Hiram. And he was standing beside my bed, and he placed his hand on my head. And then he just vanished. And from then, my ability to hear and to see returned. So it's like he just did a quick rewire.
Was this in the hospital?
No, this was at home.
Oh, okay. I didn't remember.
Yeah,
Okay.
this was when I was at home. Yeah, in the same bed that I died in.
Oh, what about your second NDE? How old was you?
The second NDE, I was almost 18. I may have just turned 18 or been about, like, within days to turn 18. And I had married a few months before to my first Bernie. We had got married. And, as we all did in the 70s,
Yep.
we all married young.
Yeah, I did too, 18.
Yeah. And I was 17 when I married my first husband, who was and still is a really lovely man. And I had lost a baby, like it miscarried early, and I'd gone to see a obstetrician gynecologist, and he said, "Oh, we better do a D&C just to make sure that everything's gone, and if there was anything that went wrong." So he booked me into this hospital for a quick surgery, which I was meant to be there for, like, a few hours, that's all. And then I had an NDE. Sorry, my doorbell's going. Do you mind if I just
Go right
dash
ahead.
off? And
Yeah, that's fine.
sorry.
It's okay.
2 seconds.
Good puppy. Good watchdog.
I have a doorbell that just goes on for ages. And delivery men. Yeah, so whilst I was having that operation, I had another NDE, and I remember, like, waking up in the surgery, and my guides, Peter and Hiram, were there again, and they said to me, "You married the wrong Bernie." And I was devastated, absolutely devastated. I'd married the wrong Bernie. And what did that mean? And I remember saying to them, "Can't I stay with him?" And they showed me a life where I could become something extraordinary, or a life where I could choose to be very ordinary. And that was a really tough choice. Anyway, so I came to in recovery after that, and my doctor came to me and he said, look, I didn't complete the operation because we had a little problem with you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, well, look, your heart stopped and we had to stop the operation to restart you. And I was pretty shocked, actually, pretty shocked. And he said, look, we're going to keep you in overnight just to observe. So I spent the night in hospital, and all I can remember about that is, I didn't have any kind of concern really or pain, but I did wonder what had made my heart stop. And I remember being really scared of rats, the hospital being overrun by rats, because that was around the time when I think some horror movie had come out about rats swarming everywhere. And here I was in this hospital all on my own, and I was pretty young. And I'm sort of thinking, oh my God, how am I going to get out of here? So, apart from the NDE, which was very brief, like my doctor never really gave me any details to me personally, because back in those days, they actually didn't have to. In fact, nowadays it's still much the same. If a doctor leaves a medical instrument inside you, they don't actually have a legal obligation to tell you.
Well, they have you sign all these papers before anything saying they're not responsible.
Yeah, that's it. If they leave a sponge inside or, whatever, a scalpel or
And
your
what choice do we
dog,
have? Sign it or not,
that's it.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah, no choice at all. So I was actually very lucky that my OB/GYN told me. And I think that's because, he really liked me as a person. He really liked me.
What was that NDE like?
Oh, sorry.
What was that NDE like?
That was a very confusing NDE because I don't know, I always just have this sense of confusion about it. I think because it changed my life dramatically from what I imagined my life was going to be, like a normal life, living a life, raising children, buying a home, having fun, whatever, to going on to a path that, that I'd never heard of. And, weird things had happened to me all the way through my life. Like when I was 14, I had gone to a friend's house, for instance, and it got later than I thought it was. So I had actually caught a taxi home. It was about 2 miles, but I didn't have time to really walk it. And I caught this taxi home to my house. And when I got home, the taxi driver, who had not said a word through the whole trip, as I was getting out the car, he said, wait. And I thought, oh my God, is he going to drive off, murder me, whatever? My parents were very concerned about our safety. And turned around and he looked at me and he said to me, you are a doorway. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you are a doorway. You are going to have to be careful all of your life. You are going to need to find out how to protect yourself. Good luck. And I thought, what does this guy mean? What does this guy mean? Well, of course, I found out what he meant. He obviously was an intuitive and he could see my energy. And basically from that point on, I began to see beings and hear voices, which led to my parents becoming convinced that I was mentally ill.
So how old was you at your third one?
My third one was when I was 29 years of age, and I was engaged to be married. And I think my wedding was about 3 months away, and I fell pregnant. And my fiance, when I told him that I was pregnant, became enraged. I mean, literally. And this is a man who was 6'7"
Mm.
tall. So he was 12 inches taller than me and had, like, size 15 feet, and big, solid, not skinny. He was a big, solid man. And he just literally became enraged. And I remember he just picked me up and slammed me into a wall, and he said, "Have an abortion." And I said to him, I will not. I do not want an abortion. I'm not having an abortion. So he started punching holes in the wall next to my head. And I thought, oh my God, this guy is going to kill me. And thank God I found out this before I married him, you know. And so I left him, and I went through the pregnancy on my own. And but the day when I was due to give birth, and I knew which day it was because it was overdue, so the doctors decided to induce me. And so anyway, I was booked to go into hospital, and into hospital I went, and the baby's father had insisted that he be there when the baby was born. So I let him know, and he came into hospital, and he stood there like, just reading a book, whatever, taking no real interest. And then when it came time for the child to be born, the child became like stuck, and they had a monitor on me, and his heart rate started dropping down and getting very dangerously low. So the doctor and the nurses knew that the baby was in real trouble. So they cut me like open a lot so that they could pull him out. And they pulled him out, but they'd also nicked something. So I started to bleed. And so there's my little baby who was dead, and they're trying to resuscitate him. And there's me bleeding everywhere, and like just blood going everywhere. And the baby's father had actually leant over to me about 2 minutes before and said to me as they were doing this, "I hope the baby's born dead." Right. And
Wow.
yeah, I know, serious. So, like, I was feeling massively cursed. And then they found they couldn't stop the bleeding, and it was getting like to a real urgent place. So they just rushed me straight off to theatre. And I remember, and they'd managed to get my son breathing again. And one of my sisters had come in to be with me, and so she was there then. And I remember saying to her, "If I die, he's yours." And they took me into surgery, and it was there that I had my third NDE. I bled out, and I remember waking up like in the same place, in that oasis kind of thing. And by that stage, I'd already been doing medical intuitive readings without calling it that, just helping people. And, I wasn't charging for it or anything. It just happened when it happened. And Peter and Hiram were there again, and they said to me that I had done a really good job at getting this profession out into the world, and now I had a choice. I could stay dead, or I could go back and keep on going. And I couldn't bear the thought, like my eldest son was 11 and my second son had just been born, and I thought to myself, I can't bear to leave these children behind. Like what's going to happen to my child if his father gets custody of him? Like, what kind of life? I had no trust in that. So I chose to return and to continue with my profession. In the end, they replaced 6 units into me of blood, so it was almost a full load. So there were 6 units of blood and then fluids. And I was stuck in bed for quite a few days, and it actually took months to recover from that. Very long, long time.
Did your son survive?
Yes,
Oh, good.
yes, he did. He is 33 years of
Um,
age now, and he's 6'6" with size 16 feet. And he has met his biological father maybe 3 times.
Oh,
Maybe 3 times. Yeah.
does he know
Yep.
that he wanted you to abort him?
No, no.
Okay.
I'm sure that he is aware of it because I don't deliberately not tell him. But what I do tell my son is that I chose to have him and that he is a beautiful young man. He's had a pretty tough life. Obviously children who have NDEs tend to, they seems to go with the territory. It just isn't easy. And, if things like he was perfectly fine one night and then he came inside and said, "Mum, I can barely walk. I can't stand up straight. I can't do anything." And we ended up calling an ambulance for him and he was taken to hospital. And this is during COVID when everything was locked down, the hospitals were locked down, and his gallbladder was about to burst apparently, and so urgent was it that the hospital pushed aside everything else
Mhm.
to do an emergency operation on him. And things like that have happened to him. So it's been a very, very tough life.
It's not a pleasant thing for a child to learn. I know when my mom told me that she was determined to abort me when she was pregnant with me, and my dad bribed her by buying her a clothes dryer so she wouldn't. So I was
I'm
her
so
5th
sorry.
child, and she said her hands would
Yeah,
crack and bleed hanging clothes on the line, and she just didn't want more diapers in her, drop with her hands. But
yeah,
but still, I never forgot it. I mean, she can't untell me that. And she wasn't apologetic. She was just like, I was not having you. And she wasn't like, I'm sorry
yeah,
I felt that way. It was just I wasn't. She just didn't want another child. So good
yeah.
thing for Maytag.
Well, I am so sorry that you went through that, Peggy, because I know that is perhaps the most destructive thing that you can actually say to a child, that this was their intention and so forth. And, with all of my children, not one of them have been planned at all. And at no point, once I found out I was pregnant, would I have chosen to abort them.
Right.
And I've worked very hard because sometimes you can get so angry and bitter, of course. I've worked very hard to not tell James about the altercations between his father and I. I tell him the good things about his biological father, and I still contact his father every now and then. I send him an email or whatever, and I tell him what James is up to. you know. I
I
say,
don't
oh,
understand these
Jesus.
vicious women that want their children to think their parent,
Mm,
they're usually it's the mother, spoiling, not sometimes reverse, but
mm,
that their dad hates them or didn't want them or tell them lies, bad
yeah.
things about. It's like
Mm,
I wanted my boys to have a dad. I mean, but went through a lot, so my boys continue to have an intact family, not know there was problems.
mm, yep. I did the same thing, like with my eldest son. Obviously, he came from my first marriage, and he was, at the time that I left him because he was a bikie and, taking and selling drugs and all this sort of stuff. And I did not want our son to grow up in that world, right? I wanted my son to have a go. And my ex-husband was quite violent towards me after I left him, even though I said blah. And but I kept him in our son's life. Like, I used to ring him up and say, "It's your weekend. Come and get our son, or come with us to his school play, or do this, do that." And when our son got married to his wonderful wife 11 years ago now, um, his father and stepmother and my husband and all of our children were there at the wedding. And my ex-husband actually got up and made a speech and thanked me. He said, "I really want to thank Carmel for keeping me involved in Harley's life, because, I wasn't an easy guy, and I, it was hard to pin down and whatever." And he said, "But it's because of her that we're all here
Wow,
today with a well-adjusted man." Yeah.
that's pretty good for Beck's husband.
Well, we're actually really good friends
That's
now.
good.
We really are, and like, I bring him up or he rings me up for a chat, and we say happy anniversary to each other on our anniversary every year. You know, he's got
Yeah.
lovely children with his wife. They've been married about 25 years, 26 years now. Yeah, it's all good. It's lovely.
Good.
Hmm.
I passed
That's how it should be.
my husband, I passed his ex-wife in a hallway a year ago, and I smiled at her. And as soon as she passed me, I heard this noise. I didn't turn around. I thought, keep walking. She's making this
Yeah,
puking noises at me.
yeah. Oh,
Like,
God.
just keep walking. Don't turn around.
Don't turn around. What an idiot. I mean, the thing is that you can you can be with somebody who's a gorgeous person, but just not be the right person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good on you
So
for
your
not
fourth
turning
one,
around.
you were dead for an hour?
Yeah.
NDE.
Mm,
You want to
yep.
share that?
Is it getting too dark in here?
No,
Do you
it's
want me to
fine.
turn? No? Fine. Okay. Yes, I will. Well, my fourth NDE actually had it was a long time coming, because when I was um when I was 14, I was hanging out with two girlfriends, and it was summer, and we were lying on a footpath, kind of the grass area of the footpath, and we were talking about our future, and I had no real idea of what my future was going to be like. And they were sort of going like, where are we going to be when we're 40, when we're 50, or whatever. And then out of my mouth came the words, "I will die at 47." You know? And these two girls sort of went, "Oh, wow, what a weird thing to say, long time off." And I thought, yeah, what a weird thing to say. That's really bizarre. But it was like this clock started inside me, like tick, 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 and every year that I got older, I'm sort of feeling like I had to rush more and more and more. So when I had the next couple of NDEs, I really wasn't, in hindsight, I realized I really wasn't that fast, and the decision wasn't hard, because I wasn't 47, and that seemed like, forever off. So about 6 months before I died, maybe a bit less, I started to develop a form of depression. I just became like really emotionally flat and disheartened. And I started giving things away, like in bulk. I gave away all my books to my eldest son. I threw away records and DVDs. And I went and made my will. And I had enduring powers of attorney, like medical, legal, financial, drawn up. And and I was really specific. I basically rid myself of anything that was superfluous to my life. And then I turned 47. And I remember waking up going, wow, I'm 47. Like today's my birthday. I'm 47 and I'm still alive. Huh, pretty good. I must have been wrong. Like these are, years of whatever. What an idiot. And the next, turned over, like that was in November, and then it turned over into the next year, and I thought, pretty good. And then one of my cousins was getting married, and the date that she was getting married was February the 14th, and she invited my husband and I to the wedding. And the day of the wedding, February the 14th, I started getting ready, and it was about 4 o'clock during the day. And I thought, I'll put on, makeup before I put on my dress and whatever, because the wedding started at about 6 o'clock. So I went into the bathroom to look in the mirror to put on my makeup. And I looked straight into my eyes in the mirror. And all I could see in my eyes was death. There was like nothing in my eyes. I don't know how to describe it other than that. But what it felt like was that my soul had already started to leave. It was getting prepared well and truly to die. It was going. And I started to cry. I have never, ever cried like that before or since. I just fell to my knees in the bathroom. Thank God I wasn't wearing my dress, which was spectacular. And and I just sobbed and sobbed, and I have no idea how long for. And finally I managed to calm down. Like when you're crying, you're sort of trying to breathe. You can't even breathe. And I finally managed to calm down, and I stood up and I looked in the mirror again, and I was an absolute hideous wreck, streaming nose, red eyes and swollen face. So I spent some time cooling my face down, and then, when that was done, I put on my makeup and put on my dress, and my husband got ready, and we hopped in the car and we went to the wedding. And when we came home, it was about 11:30 at night. It was pretty late. I went to the bathroom and I cleaned my face and brushed my teeth and put my dress away. And then I hopped into bed, and I thought about making love to my husband. And I thought, I really don't have the energy to, like elbow him in the ribs and say, come on, love. And so I just rolled over onto my side and went to sleep, and I fell asleep really quickly. And then, with almost no sense of time, I realized that I was awake. And I'm sort of like standing there and going, oh, I'm awake. But my eyes were still closed. So I opened my eyes, and I realized that I'm swaying and that I'm standing up. And I literally thought, how on earth did I get to be standing up? This is odd. Why am I out of bed? And then I looked down, and I realized that I was looking at myself in bed, and I was lying there on my back really still, and I thought, oh my God, I'm dead. Well, where is the place? Like, where are the people coming to get me? Don't tell me I'm going to be a ghost. And then, like, my brain just started going, oh, I'm going to be a ghost. Where is anything happening? I better get back into my body. So I lay back down onto my body, and then bang, I'm standing upright again. I tried it again. Same thing happened. And I just really was getting very upset about this. And then I noticed that there was like sparkles coming down from somewhere in the air, and I could see a different space in these sparkles. In other words, this is the most aware experience I've ever had. And I thought, oh, I'm not going into those sparkles. I better wake Bernie up to save me. And Bernie was an ambulance paramedic. So, I knew he would know what to do. So I'm trying to shake his body. And of course, nothing's happening, no movement. And I'm yelling out, Bernie, wake up, I'm dead. And sparkles are going on. I'm trying to keep away. I'm yelling at him and there's no response. And I'm looking at the time. And I think when I'd first realised it was dead, I had noticed the time, and it was like almost 3 a.m. And now it was about 10 past or 12 past 3 and still no Bernie. And then all of a sudden he did wake up. And I thought, oh, I'm safe. He'll realise. But then he got up out of bed and he walked around the bed and out of the room, and I went, oh no, he's going to the toilet. I thought, I'm stuffed. That's it. I'm done. All right. Because, men, certain age, they take forever. Anyway, so I literally just
They
slumped and went,
do.
that's it. They do. They do. It's terrible. Like 10 minutes before we're due to leave, I say to my husband, go to the toilet, love. We'll be here forever. And then, I really thought that was it. And he came back into the room and he got back into bed and lay down, and I really just wanted to fall to my knees and start to cry like I had earlier. And he suddenly rolled over and kissed me on the cheek. And then he sat bolt upright, turned on his lamp and stared straight at me and started CPR straight away. But of course, we were on a mattress, so the CPR was not terribly effective, but he knew he couldn't get me off the bed by himself. And when I didn't resuscitate immediately, he ran out of the room and got one of my sons and said to him, quickly, call an ambulance, your mother's dead. Right?
Mm.
So James did. He called the ambulance, and I think, they took a few minutes to get here. Well, it was actually a fire truck because they were the closest. And in Australia, they do like resuscitation and all that sort of stuff. And so they rushed down the hallway and got me off the bed onto the floor, pushed my bed over, breaking my bed.
Oh, wow.
They actually shoved it so hard and so quickly that they broke. And this is a big, solid, like wooden, beautiful bed. Oof, shoved it, set everything up on the floor. And from that point on, they did 47 minutes of CPR, which is all in my hospital records. I think they did 12 electric shocks and 3 doses of adrenaline. And they went on that long because Bernie had been a paramedic, so they knew him. Otherwise, they would have gone about 15 minutes and then stopped. And they gave me the last dose of adrenaline and another shock, and they said, oh, time to call it. She's not coming back. When I actually stepped back into my body and took a breath. And everybody in the room just went silent. Everybody. They could not believe that I had come back. Before I'd come back, I'd actually gone around the room and looked at all the people saving me so I would remember their faces and their names. So I'd like you know, who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
Oh.
I still know most of the fireys that saved me. Yeah. And
So what was the experience like while they were trying to get you back?
so while I was in heaven, it was a full-on like conversation. That was just a full-on conversation with Metatron and Jesus there, and Peter and Hiram, and basically, you know, fundamentally, there's a lot that was said and given that was very personal that I have never shared and will never share. But the fundamental thing in what I was focused on is that they were very happy with the work that I had done, and that I could now choose comfortably to be dead. In fact, you know, that was what they would like me to do, was to choose to be dead, because it had been such a hard life. Like, the things that have happened to me and my children directly because I'm a medical intuitive have been really bad. Like, for instance, in school, I had to move my children out of a school because they were being bullied and beaten up because of my profession, and none of the children were allowed to play with my kids.
Like you
You
were a
know,
witch or something?
yeah, absolutely. And I would walk into the school and go up to the mothers to talk to the mothers, and they would turn their backs on me deliberately, you know. So I'd walk up and go hello, and they would just turn their backs, you know. And still to this day, if I see one of them in the local shopping centre, they will do the same thing. They will pretend I don't exist because of my profession. So I was pretty distressed about, you know, everything I had endured. And, you know, it'd be things like I would try to find a clinic to work in, and they would ask my profession. I'd say I'm a medical intuitive. Oh, no, we don't want that here, you know. And it's a lot better now. It's a lot better than it was 25 years ago. That is for sure. It's come a
So did
long
you
way.
have a sign out or something letting people know? Is that how, or they just like word of
No,
mouth?
I have never advertised. It's all been word of mouth. And I get people from all over the world, like England and Canada and America. And, you know, and I've been to America a few times teaching this, and to the UK and Ireland and Scotland. And, you know, so it became very big.
Do you want to
Mm.
explain what a medical intuitive is?
Right. Well, medical intuitive, well, my definition, there's a lot of people, and I'll be very clear, there's a lot of people that call themselves medical intuitives, but they don't actually do any diagnosis. So um, they tend to work on the more spiritual kind of level, like, you know, you were emotionally hurt as a child and this has caused that. Well, I do that too, but what I do, the first thing I do is, when I look at a human, is I look at their energy and I see how much life force is in their field. And then if it's low, I start to put energy in for them, and then I start to change their frequency by asking different questions, which makes their brain think about different things, and different patterns and colours pop up. And I've learned over the years how to interpret that, you know. And so if I want to look at the liver, if I want to look at the heart or the ribs or the feet or whatever, I have questions I know will bring those issues up. So I look physically, and I also look in my head. So I have like a screen going in my head at the same time. And my end game is to give a person an outcome that they can bank on, as it were. So, you know, I might say to you, for instance, look, you have weak lungs. Now, I'm not doing any reading, so don't take this, you know, you have weak lungs, and so you have a greater risk of developing pleurisy or pneumonia to other people, and your right lung is the weakest one. So, if you get an infection, you need to treat it proactively, and you can do these exercises to, exercise that lung, because there are ways that you can breathe out of one lung, not the other, and so forth. And a lot of my clients are sent to me by medical practitioners, by doctors. In fact, a lot of doctors are my clients themselves nowadays. And they will often, they'll write a referral to me from, for their patient, and I will do a diagnosis, and then I will write a report for the doctor and send it back, so
Are there a
that's
lot
what
of people with that title out there? Medical intuitive?
medical intuitive. Yes, there are a lot of people with that title out there, and I often contest them. In Australia, for instance, when I started out, there was no insurance, there was no tax code, there was no legal protection for a medical intuitive, there was no code of conduct, there was nothing. And there isn't still in America or Canada. There is none of that still in America. In Australia, because of my work, now people legally are meant to be trained by my school to be a medical intuitive, and that takes a year for the basic certificate and then another year for the diploma. So they get fairly intense training, and they can get legal protection. I think we have separate thing for the tax office, so our own tax rate and so forth. And
So this isn't like a psychic gift. It's something you can learn to do.
No, it's a psychic gift. Not everyone can learn to do it.
Okay.
But if you are an intuitive of a